Welcome to Education Matters, presented by the Public School Forum of North Carolina. I'm your host, Marianne Wolf. Today's show will be coming from the Dudley Flood Center for Educational Equity and Opportunities Student Voices Series, ensuring access to rigorous coursework for all students, hosted by Ashley Kazoo, the Associate Director of the Dudley Flood Center.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining the Dudley Flood Center for our Student Voices webinar series. My name is Ashley Kazoo. I am the Associate Director for the Dudley Flood Center, and today we will be talking about how we can ensure access to rigorous coursework for all students. And to help us in talking about that topic, we will be joined today by two panels. One is a student-led panel in which you will hear from the student perspective on how we can ensure that they are all reaching their fullest potential through access to rigorous coursework. And then we'll also talk to educators in our second panel about how we can set up our classrooms and our schools to provide this rigorous coursework and support and access for all students. As we've seen the research say that there is underrepresentation of students of color and those from low income backgrounds, what are some of the barriers that you have noticed or seen or experienced yourself in gaining access to rigorous coursework, or that you have witnessed your classmates go up against in terms of gaining access to coursework?
In my school district specifically, it's been pretty difficult for us to obtain those courses. As often when we do apply for them, we either don't get into those courses or we're told that maybe we should reconsider. In my experience, I remember last year when I was applying to be placed in AP English for my junior class, that I was told that maybe I should consider taking the honors class, even though I had an A that previous semester.
Have you witnessed in any way that being virtual has impacted that type of challenge in any way? Has it helped improve getting students to access to these rigorous courses, or have you seen more students have trouble getting access to these courses?
I think the virtual learning has had a huge impact on these advanced classes and advanced placements. For one, it's taking a big toll on kids' grades and attendance levels in school. And I think that very much it affects how they get into those courses and really their application to go on to further classes and more advanced placements. And I think that it also is very hard to balance schoolwork during a pandemic and the mental health crisis we currently face.
I definitely agree with you, Sienna. And I've actually seen firsthand the statistics of my school. We've seen actually that the gap, but the grade gap and the test score gap between students of color and white students has widened in the past year, ever since we've been, at home schooling. And I think that's currently making it even more difficult for students of color to want to pursue those higher level courses. And, I know this is another topic, but another thing that impacts that is access to resources in order to be able to successfully complete those courses and take those exams.
What are some challenges that you have encountered while being enrolled in these classes? I know you mentioned that you were one of the only students of color up into a certain grade. Have you all witnessed any other challenges by being in an advanced placement course?
It's like she said, like being the only person of color in classes. Like I took Math 1 and English and math, and I was the only Black person. So some challenge I faced was being the only Black person. I really pushed myself harder to do the extra credit and to do more work in these classes because I was basically representing my color in these classes, and that really pushed me to succeed.
Yeah, you got to look at representation. And as you said, to begin with, there is low representation of people of color in these advanced placement courses. And so when you look in classrooms and you don't see many people who are Black or Hispanic or Latino or somebody who is not of white ethnicity, you look at them and sometimes people want to assume that, maybe they're kind of pitied on because people assume that we don't have the thought process that other white students do that may think more critically than other people do.
I agree 100%, Terrence. And I think another point that I could add to that is that students of color are more likely to join these courses if they see people like them already in these courses. And like you were saying before, I've had a similar experience where we start off in these honors courses and there's only one or two kids that look like us that are in these courses. So we feel like we need to represent the rest of the Black students in the school, and that we need to put up this kind of facade to make us seem very professional and intelligent. And as we continue to get to higher level courses, there's less and less of us. And that may discourage a lot of students from wanting to pursue these classes, even when they have the full capability and the full potential to succeed in these courses.
How can educators prepare, support, and encourage students to enroll in advanced courses?
Pushing more and more info out into areas, neighborhoods, for instance, that don't have the same resources financially and socially with getting information from schools and from teachers. And so they might not be able to access these things because their community may not be so much as up to date technology-wise with knowing about how to enroll in these courses. And so I think a really good tip is, for educators is to consider the fact that some students don't all come from places where there is free broadband, where broadband is even available to be able to be hooked up. And so I advise, going into these lower funded communities and pushing out the word that, your child is or has the opportunity to enroll in these courses, and they should advise that they take the opportunity of this when they can.
Teachers can prepare students to enroll in advanced courses by being transparent about the workload and topics they'll be dealing with. And this allows for students to have a clear understanding of what they're signing up for. And also teachers can support and encourage students to enroll in advanced courses by creating an environment that is open for any race or background in the classroom.
Do you feel connected in these classes? Do you feel engaged in these classes? Do you feel like your teachers in advanced coursework have a different level of engagement than those in your standard classes?
Most of my advanced teachers have been disconnected from their students and go through the motions with them because they think their intelligence level should be able to push them through the course without the guidance of a teacher. Whereas in lower classes or regular education classes, teachers are very connected with their students and they make them feel known and welcomed, and they guide them through the coursework. And I think that could also be a big issue, touching on the topic of intimidation into these bigger classes, because if you're not intelligent enough to be pushed through on your own, then you're not going to make it.
We do have advanced placement courses, and that is great. But we want to make sure that all of our students are being encouraged and challenged to reach their fullest potential. So what advice would you give to teachers in order to make that happen in the classroom?
So my advice is for them to take whatever they taught and explain it to their students how it applies to real world situations and experiences. This makes students take complex material and think about it in a more authentic setting. And nowadays, teachers teach the material, but don't really apply it to how it can, how students can apply it and use it in their life.
A way you can tell if your students are being pushed to think critically in all of their courses and not just AP courses is to look at if they are stagnant, if they are being complacent in what they want to learn and what they're open to learning, and also what their grades are like. Do you see if they're growing? Do you see if they're failing? And so if you see that they are being complacent in what they want to learn, and you see that they are not really responding well to the questions that are being asked, especially if they are consistently asked questions that have been asked over and over again, that are off of the same curriculum and off of the same of what they are learning continuously, that can tell if they are being pushed or not to think more critically.
I think adding on to that, another way to ensure that students do retain this information is when they get to start a dialogue. I feel that I tend to learn material best when I get to discuss my ideas with my peers and get to hear different sides and different perspectives.
Another big thing we need to focus on is to stop drawing a line between so-called academically gifted kids and regular students, because I think when teachers do that, they create a stigma that once you're academically gifted, you can't go back. And if you are not academically gifted, you cannot work your way up the chain of intelligence.
I think setting a welcoming climate is a great thing. Just, being encouraging and being smiling and making sure, you're checking in on the students is great, as well as the appearance of the classroom. Just having some, happy signs and, happy colors that can set a climate. is a great thing. I can personally speak to where I've been in a history class where my teacher had both a Confederate and a Back the Blue flag on the wall. And I'm sure you can imagine that that climate was not comfortable for someone who looked like me when we stepped into that classroom.
Yeah, teachers, I mean, you can just be just embracing of everybody. I mean, it even goes back to simply, in my personal experience, it's simply just body language. I mean, I've seen in my time where I had a teacher who, the white students came in, she was all happy and she was just ready to talk to them. But, when somebody who looked like me came in, it was just like, oh, okay, hi, how are you? Like it was never any like peppiness or, no excitement rather to see me rather than seeing the white students.
What is your response, or what has been the response that you've witnessed from other students when a teacher or educator suggests that you should not take advanced placement courses? What is the response there?
I have a teacher has told me that I could not take a AP course or take a course like this. And my response was to prove them wrong. I've seen a lot of my friends and people not do that and let it get to them and inevitably stop taking the courses. But I have always wanted to be or do something more with my life. So I feel like when somebody tell me I can't do something, it makes me want to do something even more.
I wanted to speak to this because I have had an experience with a counselor where, like I was talking about earlier, where they thought I should reconsider being placed in an advanced placement course. And so I just went to another counselor. You just find people that will encourage you and who will back you up in whatever decision you make. And to that point, I also wanted to speak to microaggressions because I remember freshman year of high school, I went to honors biology class and I was there for Meet the Teacher Day. And I told my teacher, like, I'm in your first period class. And she goes, maybe you want to check your schedule again because that's the honors class. And I showed her the schedule and I was like, I am in your first period class. And I wanted to make that clear. So just standing your ground and making sure that you stick to what you can do, and just the people that you keep around you are those who are going to advocate for you and who are going to encourage you to pursue what you want to do.
After the break, we will hear from our educators about how we can implement different strategies and programs in our schools and classrooms to ensure that all students have access to rigorous coursework.
Education Matters is brought to you each week in part by Town Bank, serving others, enriching lives.
Welcome back, everyone, and thank you again for joining the Dudley Flood Center as we talk about how we can ensure rigorous coursework and access to rigorous coursework for all students. Now we'll be joined by educators across North Carolina to hear about how we can implement strategies and programs in schools and classrooms to ensure access and support for students in taking rigorous coursework. What are some common state policies and practices that you've utilized or witnessed in identifying students for gifted or advanced courses?
Across the state, we have several key pieces of policy or legislation that really support this work in this area. And that give us kind of a framework for improvement and expectations, but also honor local context and flexibility. The first of those really is Article 9B, which is the legislation that really is about how do we identify and serve academically or intellectually gifted students in our state.
While we're at the state level trying to create systems that are not systems that are exclusive. We're trying to create systems that don't provide barriers. And one of the great things about Article 9B is that it allows local flexibility. So there is no state requirement for identification. It is each district's opportunity, I'd say, to figure out what is going to work in their local context.
Dr. Bullock, if you could just say, what are the ways in which students are identified in your district?
So in second grade in our district, we screen kids across the board. Any student that's enrolled in our school system, it has the opportunity to go through a universal screening process. And that is one of the ways in which we advance diversity in our AIG program. Our director, Ms. Laura Parrott, oversees that process. And that's one of the things that we have seen that has just given us a lot of growth in that area. When it comes to high school, we do a lot of work around advocating for diversifying our advanced level classes, starting with honors, but also, of course, thinking about AP and IB, and even opportunities to take college level classes too, like making sure that that opportunity and that access to that opportunity is as widespread as possible.
What are the barriers that you have witnessed your students face in getting access to those courses?
I think one of the first things is communication. When I talk with a lot of my students in my standard level courses, as well as students in other standard level courses, a lot of them honestly don't even know what AP is. They didn't even know about the opportunity, and it's not told to them. So really, I think one of the first steps is allowing the student to be an advocate for their own pathway, which was said by one of those talented students in the panel before, which was amazing. And that panel was mind-blowing, and yeah, it was fantastic. So the communication aspect, also honestly language, as far as continuously say you are gifted, you are smart, you are intelligent, versus something that can be acquired, something that, for example, like work ethic, and where you are encouraging them to think beyond it. It's just something that you were born with versus something that you can actually work for. So a lot of students, hearing that continuously, every single grade that passes where they're not identified as gifted or smart or intelligent, or not hearing the certain adjectives to describe them, that confidence, it lowers every single year that goes on. So kind of changing a little bit of the language where we kind of encourage students to be more inquisitive, enthusiastic, advocates for themselves, to work harder, to work on their skill set, is going to be, pretty crucial.
Dr. Bullock, will you please weigh in and just tell us what are some barriers that you have witnessed in your district?
In education in general, we often create artificial barriers that keep kids out of classes that we really need to eliminate. And so an artificial barrier may be you need to have a 90 in like a grade of a 90 in a previous class to enroll in an honors class. That is very arbitrary, and what goes into that grade that we're looking for. Was that a grade based on work ethic? Was that a grade based on a child's behavior? And so we put these, sometimes we put criteria up or barriers up that just really give no indication of a student's success in a future class. And so if I'm a student who may have struggled historically in a standard level class due to lack of engagement, and I'm looking to participate in something more rigorous, something more challenging, now my challenges from a previous class are preventing me from enrolling in something more challenging. And I think just generally speaking, we need to use data to be inclusive. And I think Ms. Cross spoke about that a little bit earlier.
What are the ways in which schools and districts can support and encourage parents to advocate for their students' needs?
We always talk about as parents are needing to advocate for their students, really starting as local as possible. So bringing in that school, bringing in those parents to provide those opportunities. So, whether it's, some schools out there that have parent university nights, right? Well, they bring in parents and they have information sessions just for them. Of course, that was pre-COVID. I'm not sure. I'm sure they're doing virtual parent university nights right now, but again, helping them to know the why and understand how this will benefit their student. We think that's hugely important. And then also helping parents to help their students make the connections. There are so many opportunities that are available to our students today. So thinking about really intentionally, what are my interests and passions, what I want to do here in high school, but beyond, and how can I tap into these programs and opportunities so that I can get to that place.
But what advice do you all have for educators in preparing and supporting students in providing access to rigorous coursework?
One is to really reflect on your own implicit biases. I think that's first. I think they also need to know that students can receive the same content, or it's not about receiving the same content at the same time, at the same pace. It's about personalized learning, which can be overwhelming, I think. So it's about, you don't have to do this on your own. Most of our districts in North Carolina have professional learning communities, other educators for you to lean on, and a specialist in the school. And then also with that first part, there may be an equity team at the school. I think it's about being that lifelong learner that we all went into teaching to talk to our students about being, and we've got to do that as well. And it's about recognizing students who come with easily recognizable gifts and talents, and that's fine, but it's about being a talent scout that we've mentioned earlier, and intentionally creating environments to recognize and develop talents in those who are not yet tapped.
We know based off the data that we have a huge opportunity gap based off of race and based off of people that have been plagued generation after generation with poverty. And we have to understand that data is not coincidental, data is consequential. And it is a consequence of a system that was designed this way, right? So in order to fight for these issues of equity, we have to recognize that students don't come from the same backgrounds, they don't have the same experiences, and they don't have necessarily the same set of skills and talent. However, so many students have different levels of potential. So I think one of the first things that all teachers have to be willing to do is have that difficult conversation. And I was just seeing it in the chat, and I just really wanted to address it. Yeah, we have to have the difficult conversation of the role that race has played within recommending kids for AIG or for these honors level courses. Like Ms. Morgan Lopez had said in the student panel, when she had went into her class and the students said, you might need to rethink your schedule because I don't think you're in there. And it was only based, I mean, we can assume it was only based obviously off of her race because it's the only thing that the teacher knew about that student. And so therefore, we have to have, the first thing is that these teachers have to have difficult conversations, and the schools in general have to have it.
We have to acknowledge the role that we play in the inequities we see. So, but the only way we're going to see those inequities is to look. We have to look and see how is racial inequity, class inequity, whatever, manifesting in our school on our watch. And while we can't own all of the inequity that may happen in our school due to outside factors, we have to own the part that we play in the inequity and the disparities. And so honestly, we all, me included, have to be able to identify what I'm doing to close gaps and how some of my practices may actually be widening gaps. And where I see that some of my practices may be widening those gaps, I have to change those practices so that we're increasing opportunities for students, we're closing that access gap to advanced academics, and just making sure that the work that we are doing is done intentionally to increase and improve outcomes for our most marginalized students.
Thinking about these students, changing first our mindsets and looking at them as students at potential, not at risk, because these kids are not coming to us as empty vessels. They do have strengths and they do have a lot for us to tap into to really reach students. And so just really thinking about that, but also thinking about mindsets and policy and practice. It really takes all of those things together for us to continue to move forward. And I can just remember not really thinking so much about the policy, that seems kind of dry and, not as interesting, but it's policy that really has an opportunity to help us move forward leaps and bounds, because that then we're all held to, and we aren't so dependent on a single educator here or there willing to have the conversation and willing to step up and advocate, right? It levels the playing field in so many ways. So that mindset's going to get us huge steps forward, adding that to that, the policy, and then also our practices. We think all of those things together, that's going to help us create systems that do help us improve outcomes for students.
Thank you all for joining us again. And we want to send a special thank you to our panelists, our students, and our educators for joining us today to discuss this topic. And we want to send another special thank you to all of you for taking an interest in education. That's all for this week, and we'll see you again next week.